So, what have we got for you today? Well, the Mirror has splashed on claims last night that Tory MPs are already plotting to get rid of Liz Truss by Christmas for the sake of both their party and the nation's mental health. But this morning, events have rather overtaken us, indeed most newspapers, with an announcement by Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng that he is going to scrap his tax cut for the wealthiest people in society and bring back the 45% rate. This is what he says. From supporting British businesses and blah, blah at the beginning, let's ignore that. However, it's clear the abolition of the 45p tax rate has become a distraction from our overriding mission to tackle the challenges facing our country. As a result, I'm announcing we are not proceeding with the abolition of the 45p tax rate. We get it, and we have listened. This will allow us to focus on delivering the major parts of our growth package. First, our energy price guarantee, which will support households and businesses with energy bills. Second, cutting taxes to put money back in the pockets of 30 million hardworking people and grow our economy. And third, driving supply-side reforms, including accelerating major infrastructure projects to get Britain moving. Now, this is being widely seen, Ben, indeed trailed by Truss and Kwarteng there, as them listening and responding to the widespread public anger among pretty much everybody. And it's probably got a lot to do with keeping their jobs as well. But is it going to work, do you think?
I think the damage has already been done. Now they've got the problem of they showed their true colours in wanting to cut this the additional higher rate of tax, 45p rate. So they took the hit for announcing that and showing whose side they were on and what their priorities were. But then, stung by the backlash, they've done this U-turn this morning. So now they're open to accusations of, well, they haven't got the courage of their convictions. It's a lose-lose situation for the Prime Minister and the Chancellor. And I was talking to a senior Conservative this morning who basically said it's better to take the hit now and get it over and done with, because they basically accepted that they wouldn't be able to have got it through the Commons anyway, i.e. they would lose a vote on this in Parliament, and you'd have weeks and weeks of people like us writing, you know, you're on the side of the people earning 150 grand a year plus the millionaires, when you're preparing to cut benefits in real terms. So they've taken a decision this morning that get it out of the way, do it now, 9 or 10 days, I think, since the emergency budget, and that's the lesser of an evil.
This is the easiest thing to do, perhaps. And they're trying to, get through conference without being murdered by their own activists. And they're also trying to sort of get to Christmas, pretty much, I should think, and try and get through this crisis we've got in sterling at the moment. Now, get into the questions. What do you think? Do you think this is going to work? Does this change your mind entirely about Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng? Were you anti them before and now suddenly you're pro? Let us know. Now, when Kwasi made his announcement, trading in the pound actually rose by a ginormous, whopping, earth-shattering 1%. Then it slumped down again straight afterwards, presumably when the traders worked out that bankers' bonuses are still being axed, stamp duty, corporation tax, national insurance, and the 20p rate of income tax all still being cut, funded by borrowing, £70 billion worth of it. Is this going to settle the markets, Ben? Because the argument all along, wasn't it, was that the 45p tax cut was the politically most damaging thing, but financially just the smallest part of the whole package. It was the least important thing to do. While the rest of it is this massive chunk of unfunded borrowing that they still haven't accounted for. That's going to be the real problem, isn't it, as far as the markets are concerned?
Yeah, so in the mini budget Friday before last, it was £45 billion worth of tax cuts and £72.4 billion worth of borrowing. Now, the 45p rate only actually accounted for £2 billion. So in the overall scheme of things, it wasn't a lot of money. But politically, a huge amount of capital was spent by Liz Truss and by Kwasi Kwarteng on saying they wanted to cut it. And in the end, it just wasn't worth it, because it was a surprise move. A lot of the measures that were announced in that emergency budget, mini budget, had been trailed in advance, and we knew what was coming up. And I was actually sitting in the chamber in the press gallery when it was announced, and it was a genuine surprise. We all sort of mouths dropped open, everyone looked around at each other thinking, wow, well, we weren't expecting that. And then minutes later, when we were being briefed by the Treasury, we got pointed to the figures showing how much that particular measure was worth. And I remember thinking at the time, well, that's not a lot of money, and people are really going to hate this. And it just seems so, not pointless, but a bit, why are they doing this? It was an odd hill to die on. And now that they've done the U-turn, which was inevitable because they wouldn't have been able to get it through the Houses of Parliament anyway. They've created all this chaos, and what you can't forget is, all right, they've put they're not going to go ahead with the 45p cut, but because of the chaos that it unleashed on the markets anyway, well, people's mortgages have gone up now. People literally thousands of pounds a year worse off because they have to make more in interest payments on their mortgages as a direct result of what happened. So even though, they've gone back on it, well, it still cost all of us in hundreds of pounds extra a month in what we have to repay on our mortgages.
Yeah.
So
those mortgage rates won't come down as quickly as they went up, will they? Guaranteed. Now, Mike says, good morning, Mike. What else from the mini budget could be scrapped before conference is done? Bankers' bonuses, corporation tax. Have they actually, is Mike right, have they weakened themselves here? Because you've turned on something Liz Truss just yesterday was saying, I am absolutely committed to this. 24 hours later, she's gone. Has this weakened them in terms of everything else they want to do? Because their MPs and the Labour Party will all see, well, look, they can be undermined. They can be made to change their mind on all of it if we want to.
The corporation tax, it's not a tax cut. It's not going ahead with a rise that was due to come in, which I know is a bit technical, but that'll still go ahead. That rise won't happen now. But it's got sort of cross-party support really, not to go ahead with that. And the argument could be because, well, business is they're facing enough problems as it is with energy bills. So by not pushing ahead with a rise in corporation tax, and so many Conservatives were behind not going ahead with that rise. When it was first announced, they objected to it because obviously the party is seen as the party of business. So I don't think there'll be a U-turn on that. Bankers' bonuses, had it not been for the 45p additional rate, there would have been a lot more anger about the scrapping of the cap on bankers' bonuses. But the only reason the government is able to scrap the cap on bankers' bonuses is because we've left the EU to post-Brexit benefit, if you like, for bankers. And because it's one of the tangible things that the government can do now we've left the European Union, I think that will also stay. In terms of what to look for that they might end up U-turning on, well, it had been announced previously that benefits would rise in line with inflation. In the past few days, the government, various ministers, the Prime Minister, the Chancellor, and the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Chris Philp, have all failed to commit to that, which has obviously raised fears that the benefits won't rise in line with inflation, which what that means is it's a real terms cut for people on welfare. Now, that is the one to watch because the government, it'd be hugely expensive if they did rise benefits in line with inflation. But if they don't, you can make the argument that they're hitting the poorest. And, all right, they're not going ahead with this 45p tax rate cut, but they wanted to. So that shows whose side they're on. So I think that's the key one to watch because there's a lot of centrist Conservatives who are deeply unhappy and worried about how that will play for their constituents who are on welfare and how it will cost Conservatives in the long run, because it's the sort of thing that does help you lose elections.
Exactly, and that will still be, compared to bankers' bonuses, won't it? And if you're axing benefits, but you're giving bankers their extra bonuses, then that's still going to be politically very, very toxic for them. Now, Mike says, good morning, Mike, another Mike, different one. Are they going to compensate those families who now have higher mortgages because of their incompetence? Mike, I'd love to see that class action being taken against Kwasi Kwarteng for saying silly things. And who knows? It should probably happen. But I think, Ben, we've got the same situation, haven't we, in conference this week when Kwasi Kwarteng stands up and makes a speech, if he gives any kind of public statement, and I've never known this happen before at a party conference, but sterling could go up or down, interest rates could go up or down, depending on the questions he's asked and the answers that he gives at what is just a party jamboree, couldn't it?
Yeah, the problem is, MPs, particularly Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, they're used to going around conference fringes and thinking out loud and saying mad stuff in the company of people who are their political allies. The problem is, once you're the most senior minister and second most senior minister in the country, you can't just think out loud and say mad stuff because it has real world consequences, as you see for mortgages. And as you see with Sterling, it's quite commonplace during a budget where a chancellor is delivering economic forecasts, economic measures to watch Sterling. The geeks in the city, they do that and they watch the charts of the rise and fall on a particular announcement, second by second.
Yeah.
But a party conference, you shouldn't really be doing that. But the problem is, when he says stuff on the radio, it's not just political geeks who are listening to him on the radio, watching him on the television. It's actual people who decide what the mortgage rates are, that sort of thing. It has real world consequences and impact on real people. And I think that's something that Kwasi Kwarteng and Liz Truss are going to have to get used to. You can't just think out loud at a right-wing think tank at party conference with a glass of warm white wine in your hand. This is real stuff now.
Yeah, well, thinking out loud, that's an absolute damned there, but faint praise. Now, Basics of Islam, perhaps not the real name, says, I'm not sure why omnishambles is not being used to describe this budget. Is it because we've had 12 of these, so the description is meaningless? Omnishambles is no longer enough of a portmanteau to really cover what's happening. One of the words that's being used inside number 10, according to Sunday Times yesterday, was truster. As he used to call it, a cluster, and now it's a truster. So that pretty much covers it, but we can't discuss that here. Ben, have you heard any better portmanteaus for what's happening?
None that are repeatable, no. That omnishambles thing, originally that came from, I think it was the thick of it, of course, and then Ed Miliband used it quite liberally to describe, I think it was the 2012 budget with a pasty tax. Heady days of the pasty tax.
The church roof tax and the pasty tax and other things that seemed quite terrible at the time. I'd kill for a pasty tax now. Now, Gail says, isn't she just keeping Boris's seat warm for him? I assume that was the plan. There was also some suggestion yesterday in the Sunday papers that Boris is just sitting quietly, was very supportive of her bid for leadership because he knew she would fail quite badly, and that he's just waiting to be invited back in again for the end of the term. Do you think that's likely?
I don't. I mean, even the dogs in the street were predicting that she wouldn't do particularly well as Prime Minister. So the fact that Boris was sort of sitting back waiting for it to unfold into the chaos it has.
That's genius.
That's not some sort of evil plot by Boris. That was just common sense. I think I always thought that the Conservative Party would regret getting rid of Boris Johnson. He's a proven election winner. Led them to the biggest majority since 1987. For all his faults, which were legion, he did win elections. And it sort of shows the arrogance of the party that they think they could stay in power, whoever was their leader. Liz Truss doesn't have that political appeal that Boris did. Boris does. I remember going around during the Hustings campaign, during the Hustings leadership election, and we were talking to people in the street, and these were not Conservative Party members. They were ordinary people. So we were in the towns rather than vox popping people in the queues. So these are ordinary people. And at least a third of the people I was speaking to said, well, they shouldn't have got rid of Boris. It's not fair what they've done to him. Oh, Partygate. Yeah, but everyone has a drink. Everyone broke the rules. I mean, obviously that's not true. But that's the sort of, there was a lot of affection and still sympathy for what happened to Boris Johnson. In my view, a lot of it was misplaced. But it shows a sort of wider affection out there for the flawed genius Prime Minister who won election.
It shows the benefit of whatever the first impression is does tend to stick. So if the first impression of Boris Johnson was, have I got news for you? And he's quite entertaining and witty. That seems to have been what embedded. Whereas the first impression of Liz Truss is, what? So that's the one that's kind of embedded a bit. But very quickly, before we go on to the next story, if you've got any questions about Liz Truss or how you think Tory Conference is going, get into the comments and let us know. But very quickly, Ben, you're up there this week with the Angry Red Trouser Brigade. What is the feeling on the ground? Are they rebellious? Are they plotting against her?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are going, this can't go on. You've got to remember, this is less than a month into her being Prime Minister. Because of the Queen dying and the row about the emergency budget, it seems like it's gone on for a lot longer. But it was only, I believe it was September the 6th that she became Prime Minister. And we're only on October the 3rd. So there's a lot that has happened in that month. And people have formed their views. But already people are talking about or what do the rules say on when we can get rid of a leader? We knew this would happen, didn't realise it would happen so quickly. So people are trying to work out how they might be able to get rid of her. Now, we talk about a lot's happened in a month. Well, of course, we're still more than 2 years out from a general election. The next general election by law has to be held on, I think it's January the 25th, 2025. So that's 2 years and 3 months away. So if everyone calms down, she could still recover this to the point where it's not a huge landslide for Labour. Whether she can win a general election, I'm not sure now. But events, dear boy, events. A lot can happen in those 2 years and 3 months. So if possible, she can recover it. It's just as possible that the Conservatives will find a way to get her out so that somebody else fights the next general election as leader.
Yeah, I think we need someone to indicate perhaps they want the job, and at the moment, who'd want to take over that? We'll have to see, won't we?